All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see a full room. I will now call to order tonight's meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have a quorum of 7 commissioners present. First and foremost, happy Historic Preservation Month to one and all. This nationwide program the Historic Preservation Month is in its 51st year of celebrating, and this year's theme is People Saving Places, which our agenda tonight generously demonstrates. To celebrate here in Evanston, I thought of a couple things that we could do, and they're all reflected in our agenda. We can share our gratitude for our very own Carlos Ruiz for his steadfast 32-year career of carefully administering Evanston's preservation ordinance with an open door, overseeing several local and federal districts and numerous landmark designations that will endure, and in so doing, ensuring Evanston's built and cultural environment continue to tell our stories. Thank you, Carlos. We can also volunteer with the Evanston Preservation staff and commission. We can sign up to receive the Evanston Historic Preservation newsletter. And we can nominate a person or a team for recognition through the newly restored Cultural Heritage Awards program. More details on all of these items are forthcoming in tonight's agenda. The City of Evanston's Preservation Ordinance empowers this body to oversee and administer the community's historic preservation program. During our monthly public meetings, we encourage public participation, afford due process through public hearings on proposed landmark designations and applications for certificates of appropriateness, and we discuss ways to advance long-range planning goals beyond case review. We ask anyone who wishes to address the commission to sign in and indicate the discussion item, designation, or application to be addressed. If you haven't already signed in, there's a sign-in sheet at the podium. The first order of business tonight will be public comment on items listed under discussion on the agenda. For old and new business items, I will ask staff to read each case into the record. And once a case has been read into the record, the applicant presents an overview of the proposal, including evidence and testimony that support the applicable review standards being met. Commissioners will then ask questions of the applicant. And following that questioning period, members of the public may speak toward the application, please keeping your comments to 3 minutes or less. Following the public comment, the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to any evidence or testimony against the application as it relates to our review standards. The commission then closes the record and proceeds to deliberation and a motion to either approve the proposal or approve with conditions. A simple majority of the quorum present is required for a motion to carry. After old and new business conclude, the commission considers the previous public meeting's minutes and then discusses actions pertaining to long-range planning goals. I will now move ahead to item number 2 on the agenda, the public comment. It includes, Kate, did you want to introduce the letter from Carlos that's in the public comment? Sure. No, please go ahead.
I'd like to take this opportunity to read a letter that was submitted by Carlos Ruiz, he's on vacation currently, but he says, "Dear Chair Dreller and members of the Preservation Commission, after 32 years and 9 months of working for the City of Evanston and being the staff for the Preservation Commission for 30 years, and feeling that I have worked diligently to achieve desired outcomes in the field of historic preservation, I have decided to retire effective June 1st, 2024. Over the years, the Commission has made important strides to benefit the Evanston community at large by effectively and graciously administering the current binding preservation ordinance, which was unanimously adopted by City Council in May 1994. The current ordinance has allowed the City Council, with the Commission's favorable recommendations, to create local historic districts, including the Lakeshore Historic District, Ridge Historic District, which were both previously designated as federal historic districts only, the Northeast Evanston Historic District, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union Historic District. In addition, since 1994, with the Commission's positive advice, the City Council recommended to the National Park Service the creation of the Oakton National Register Historic District and the northern portion of the Northeast Evanston Federal Historic District. The City Council adopted local ordinances declaring additional structures as Evanston landmarks, bringing the number of structures under the purview of the Preservation Ordinance from originally 800 landmarks only to approximately 2,500 structures, including landmarks and historic district properties. Today, the Commission is actively implementing a 20-year plan called Preserve 2040. This is an important milestone for historic preservation in Evanston, and I applaud the Commission for working out the plan and almost immediately proceeding with its implementation. Finally, I want to say that it's been a real pleasure and privilege for me to work for the City of Evanston and the Preservation Commission since 1991. I wish the Commission and City staff all the best in achieving the desired goals. Most sincerely, Carlos.
Thank you, and we have another public discussion item, or excuse me, public comment item. Come to the podium.
Sarah Dreller, Evanston resident, landmark homeowner. You guys know me. Okay, my item on the agenda was going to be in the discussion section under discussion, which is what we're talking about now. Okay. So as part of the, my computer is covering my time. Can you just let me know when I'm about to go over? Okay, thank you. Earlier this year, I think it was January, we voted on an annual work plan, and that included an element from the Preserve 2040 plan, which had to do with reviving the consortium. So for those of you who don't know or don't remember what the consortium was, it was a kind of a network or a group of leaders from the preservation community that kind of got together a couple times a year and talked about how they could collaborate together, and it was sponsored by the Commission, but it was pretty much run by Carlos. During the pandemic, I think it was during the pandemic, right, Kate? It kind of stopped happening, and it hasn't really been revived since. So it ended up being in the 2040 plan because it's a kind of a special task in 2040, because it's not an end in itself. It's like the thing we have to do in order to then be able to do other things, to kind of have these partnerships and stuff. And just as a reminder to you and anyone watching this on YouTube, the Preserve 2040 plan is not a to-do list for the Commission. It's a to-do list for Evanston's preservation community. So if we were to have the consortium again, we would have this sort of infrastructure for partnerships. So that was the idea. Anyway, that ended up in our work plan, as you guys remember, and it's been rolling around in my head for a couple months how to kind of get started, because it's kind of a big thing. And then the National Association of Preservation Commissions had a webinar about the value of partnerships between commissions and local nonprofits, which I was like, okay, somebody's reading my mind. So I went ahead and watched it, participated, whatever. And so that's what I want to do, is just sort of summarize for you what they said in that webinar and put it in your mind so that then we can kind of try to figure out what next steps are together. I want to actually also say, and this is kind of important, that I do think that the consortium should probably really shift over to the Commission's work rather than relying on staff to kind of organize some of those logistics. I think that's something that we can do as a Commission. I think we'll get as much or more out of it doing it together. Okay, very quickly. The webinar, first of all, focused primarily on nonprofits and what nonprofits what the benefits are for partnering with nonprofits, what the nonprofits get from the commissions, the kind of opposite of that, wasn't really discussed. So that's something that we will need to articulate if we want to take the next step in this consortium, because otherwise, it's not necessarily clear to our potential partners what they're going to get out of it. But for us to understand what the nonprofits can do very briefly, nonprofits can be more nimble, especially with regard to, first of all, some kinds of advocacy, especially responding quickly when there's something going on. Nonprofits can kind of step up and do something about it in a way that commissions don't really don't necessarily have the ability to kind of act quickly. The other thing that nonprofits can bring to the commission is collecting funds. And that can be used for things like signage, historic district signage or whatever, and also events. So that's something that if we were to have an existing infrastructure to partner with local nonprofits, we could do that. Nonprofit leaders can attend conferences and other networking events, which, because we are volunteers, we don't have a budget really, so it's hard for us to do that and sort of stay informed in that way. And also city staff don't necessarily get the opportunity to go to conferences. They have it's time and money and city priorities and stuff, but the local nonprofit groups can sometimes do that for us. Another thing is that nonprofits can help amplify the commission's voice by supporting specific initiatives that are relevant to them, sort of trying to make sure that the city continues to hear from more than just those of us who are sitting here in the council chambers once a month. And then the other thing is that they can help spread the word among their members. Kind of, you guys remember before the internet, you would have like phone trees where you would call somebody and then they would call 5 people and whatnot. So that's the idea, is that they have members. So for instance, we have this new awards program. Well, if we had some nonprofit partners, organized in advance, they could then let their members know that their awards and, would kind of get out. So there's lots of advantages to having a consortium, at least to us. It's, in my mind, it's definitely worth the time doing. So I'm probably at my time, so I'll just end by saying that I'm willing to take the lead on this, so if you guys have some thoughts on who we might want to include in this, beyond the big organizations, which we already know are going to be included, but let's try to have, take a wider view of this. Please email me, copy Cade, and I'll sort of bring it all together in a list and bring it to the commission the next time, in June or July, depending on how things go. And then I'm going to keep sort of thinking about this, because there are some more steps that need to be taken. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know if
You're a little over, but
yeah.
that's okay. Thank you. Open it up to public comment?
Yeah, just ask if there's anyone else.
Yeah. Is there anyone else here with public comment? All right. Regarding anything except for old and new business. So are there any public comments on the discussion item that was just brought up on? Or just a general address? How you doing?
But not for these.
Right, not for the old and new business yet. Those will be during the. Okay. Okay, with that, then let's go ahead and move into the old business. Cade, would you read the, you don't really need to read that into the record, do you? Okay, so we have the revised certificate of appropriateness application form. And tonight, this is, the second time that we've seen this. It has been revised, and hopefully everyone has had a chance to review it. And so what we need to do is review it and adopt the new version. First of all, is there any discussion from the commission about the new version? Everyone have a chance to
Aside
look it
from
over?
what we talked about at the last meeting, was there anything new that was added or changed that was submitted via email?
I had some very minor comments that Carl sent me, like reorganizing the order of some of the supplemental documentation so that it made a little more sense, and adding a little statement under the applicant's signature that talked about basically that they're affirming that they understand the requirements and that they've submitted a complete application, but very minor.
Can I mean, one of the suggestions, I think that this application is great, it's nice, but one of my suggestions that I emailed Cade about, and I do not expect this to happen tonight, but eventually in the near future, I thought about potentially making this a digital application so that, I know the city of Evanston uses FormStack, and so if we just made it that way every field is required, you know, and so when someone's submitting the application, then we're almost ensuring complete applications that way. And it's just a way of streamlining, you know, they can put in one PDF for the entire application, and it helps staff getting, you know, all these applications. So that was just one of my suggestions.
All right, does anyone have a motion to make regarding the new form?
Sorry, just a quick question. I didn't look super closely because I reviewed it, but I'm sorry, where's we talked about incorporating something on the new, like, tree ordinance? Is that?
Yeah, there's a section under, I forgot the title, major alterations, and this one, major alterations, additions, new construction, relocation, and demolition. It asks for the same information.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay, just want to make sure it was incorporated. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Concerns? Any motions? There'd be a motion to approve the amended form.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised certificate of appropriateness application form. Do I have to say anything, or just that? Okay.
All right, all those in favor? Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. All right, now, all those in favor? Aye. Mhm. All those opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, great. All right, we've got an amended application, COA form. Great. All right, moving right into new business. Kate, I'll ask you to read the record into business.
Case number 24 PRS 0046, 1525 Judson Avenue in the Lakeshore Historic District. Anthony Hertig, architect and applicant on behalf of the homeowner, requests a certificate of appropriateness to demolish an existing detached two-car garage and construct a new detached two-story accessory dwelling unit with ground floor parking in the rear yard. The applicable standards are demolition 1 through 5 and construction 1 through 14 and 16. Tony, thanks.
Hello, thanks for hearing us today. I want to preface this proposal, by saying I'm here with the entire Salem family, 3 generations, mother and father who currently reside in the residence at 1525, their son and daughter-in-law, and then their grandkids who are here too. And the idea here is their hope is to live to have the whole family together. Omar and his wife Stephanie will be in the main house with their 2 kids, and their parents will be in the proposed ADU. So they want to be close family. I'll just read from the application. The proposed ADU, as was mentioned, and 2-car garage are intended to replace the existing 2-car garage. The existing frame garage is not suitable to be adapted for 2 stories because it has a thickened slab rather than a full foundation, which is required by building code to support a 2nd floor. to accommodate 2 bedrooms and a very modest living space. Some additional floor area beyond the 452 square foot footprint of the existing garage is desired by the homeowners who, as I just mentioned, will be moving into the ADU. The existing principal residence was at one point, probably around 22 years ago, clad in Dryvit, which is an exterior insulation finish system by the previous owners. And I included in the packet an image from when, a black and white image that you may have seen, what the house looked like prior to the application of the Dryvit. Let's see. So the original home was built in 1954. The proposed ADU and garage would be wood frame, clad in pre-finished fiber cement, 7 or 8 inch exposure. We have discussed the possibility of, rather than using the clapboard, going with traditional stucco, but the proposal for now is doing the clapboard. The stucco would relate more directly to the existing house, but the clapboard relates more to the tradition of that building type, and that's where we are at the moment. My belief is that the proportions of the openings, double-hung windows, horizontal trim band, are consistent with those in the principal house, as is the low-pitched roof and the shallow eaves. Is there anything else I can add?
Do commissioners have any questions?
I have a question. So, my understanding, like you said, to build the 2-story garage, you have to pour a foundation, right, instead of the slab for the current garage?
Basically, yeah. So had it been possible to say just extend the slab and the thickened slab of the existing garage, that would have been great, but unfortunately, it's not, I mean, by code, and also, I mean, for very good reason, you can't add a second floor on top of that minimal support.
And was any consideration taken for the line of trees? I think that around the neighboring property that may be affected by the new foundation with the roots or anything?
Well, what drove the design was, for the most part, the footprint required to allow for a living space above. There is considerable growth to the south of that, but we would do everything possible to avoid with overdig affecting those. And there's, yeah, I mean, that would be the whole.
So one last question. What's the setback of the neighboring? So you're going to have 3 feet, the proposed is 3 feet from the lot line, but what's the neighboring property? How far, what's the setback from the lot line for that house?
I don't have that information in front of me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The existing garage, I can say, is just a little bit south of the required 3-foot setback. So we'd be a little bit north of that, although the east end of the addition would be carving into new territory.
If there are no more questions for the architect, then we can move to public comment. Is anyone here for public comment regarding this project? Okay, come on up. Thank you. And if you're not already signed in, then, okay, great. Thank you. And if you can just introduce yourself and then
Hi, my name is Mitchell Harrison. Great to be here talking to you guys. Maybe not that great, but still, it's been a while. I live at 1519 Judson, next door to these nice people who've been there maybe 2 or 3 years. I've owned and lived in our house, which was built by a very famous ballroom dance instructor back in 1938. So I've owned it, lived in it. A week ago, it was 40 years, so I've been there a long time. My interest in historic preservation goes back many more years than that. I was showed and taught by my dad what that was all about well before my teenage years, and the interest kind of just stayed with me forever. We used to have a preservation league of Evanston, of which I was the president of for several years, and we were in several battles to stop or save destruction or alterations of some what we consider to be very historic buildings, and we won a few of those battles. It was a great group. I always have considered Evanston, and still do, to be a very historic city, and I know all of you do too. By the way, I'm also a member and for many years of the Evanston History Center, and as someone in the printing business for 40-some years, I was a donor to them for 25 years or more, printing their Mother's Day Housewalk book for free, and always felt very close to them, and still do, through several different leaders of that organization. The area that I live in, that we live in, has been designated a historic district for a long time ago, and very much protected over those years. Alterations have only been allowed basically in the rear of homes or apartment buildings, and even those have been hard fought for some people to get due to the fact that it's a district that's very, very well preserved. No one, by the way, I've respected this law for many, many years, not just because I live in it, but just because of who I am and what I like. No one has attempted or been allowed to ever do a project along the lines of what's been proposed. Forgetting about blocking out light for our house, you can go down the line, and there'll be some other speakers, including someone I'm very close to, who can explain to you more in depth, maybe a little less emotional than I am, about why this project should be denied, why it's completely inappropriate. And with that, I'll let the next person speak. Thanks so much for your time.
Hi, I'm Donna Harrison. I'm Mitchell's wife. I also live at.
Can you speak into the
I don't know how to
microphone?
do this. I do not know how to do this, but I will try very hard. Oh, and I'm short. Okay, can you all hear me now?
That's
Okay,
better.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Okay, so my husband and I live at 1519 Judson. We are just to the south of these lovely people, who I have called my friends for the years that they have lived here, which hasn't been many, but we are neighborly, and I do like them very much. I'm just afraid that I'm vehemently against what, unfortunately, they propose to do. Carl, when you were talking about where you are, I have pictures of how close that garage is to my lot line. It's right there. There is a little bit of space between their primary residence and what they're proposing to put up. There's hardly any distance. There are 5 homes on our block. 5 homes on our block, which there are a few people that already live here. It's a very small, tiny unit. And I know that I am passionate and emotional, and I know there are ordinances that may prevent me from getting what I want here. But you opened this whole program with how important and passionate it is for preservation in the city of Evanston. And I am too. It's a very small block with this is a very tiny lot that they want to build this whole second 2-story building on it. I have pictures of what they want to do to the back of the home that butts up against my neighbor over here, Bob Egley's home. It just doesn't seem like it's the type and appropriate of a proposal for our area. And yes, I understand that these people want to be a family together. I appreciate that very much. But I am not young. Wally and Virginia are not young. And then when they may not be here any longer, what's to say that Omar is going to rent it to some students at Northwestern? And I'm just hoping that you can foresee, and I can leave you all my pictures, that you will understand how important it is for us in our small little neighborhood to have something like this project not happen. And that's what I thought the Preservation Committee was all about. My neighbor across the street told me it was an act of Congress, he was kidding, just to put one window in the front of his home because it took 6 months for the Preservation Committee to allow him to put the same exact window in the front of his home. It's a very small, it isn't an alley. This is their front facing of the house that they want to add that will cover my light to my master bedroom and to the window in my master bedroom, because it will go up and it is so close to my property that even a 3-foot setback isn't going to give much. This is a large project on a very, very small spot. One last thing, is I have 24 seconds, is that the postcard only came out somewhere around the 6th or 7th of May. Okay, this is the 5th, only the 14th. I only got to look at your proposal right before the weekend. I have not had time to even digest it, to let alone know that this was happening. We heard about this from our neighbor who sold them the house. I'm coming. And I thought that maybe they lived here long enough and be in our community and not want to do this project, but now it's here at our doorstep. And I would like to ask you all if we could have time as neighbors to really digest and look at this project further. The guy here didn't even know what the setback was from my property. His garage is on my lot line. So we would like to know whether or not you would even give us some time and maybe table this to next month so that we would have time to be able to look more at this project. Thank you very much for your time. And if you want my pictures, you can have them.
Yeah, we'll share them with everyone.
I have more. That's okay. I can explain them too. Go ahead and start down there.
Hi. And are you signed in already?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Tom Breen. I live at 1515 Judson Avenue, and I've lived there for about 20 years. I've never been before this committee before. I've read all about you, and I know you're doing a wonderful job. This is, my objection is not to the family, it's to this project, and my objection is strong. When I look at this sketch here up on the screen, this looks like a wonderful setup for a half-acre lot in LaSalle County, not on Judson Street in Evanston. And I say this with some respect. This home was purchased just 2 or 3 years ago, and obviously their plans have changed, or they felt that they would be able to do this. There's a lot of real estate for sale in Evanston that would accommodate their family's setup. I was shocked when I saw the postcard. I am shocked that anybody thinks they can build basically another residence on a lot that is extremely small. This lot does not go back at all. As a matter of fact, it's maybe 3 or 4 feet away in the back, away from the neighbors. This puts 2 homes on one of the smallest lots on the street, and it's not right. Nobody ran it by us before, so the only chance we get to say anything is here publicly. I wish someone had discussed it with us so that they would know what our objections were. It's not right. It's putting 2 houses, basically, on a very small lot. Any other second residence on our block is in the alleys in the back, I forget what they're called, coach houses or whatever. This does not fit in the neighborhood. It's not necessary at all. It is going to be a horrible obstruction for our neighbors, the Harrisons. And I'm sorry to come here and object to anything that anybody wants to do for their family, but this is not fair to the neighbors. This request is a huge ask, and it's not justified.
And hello. My name is Robert Egley. I live at 324 Davis Street. I would like to comment about the 300 block of Davis Street. It is and has been a part of the historic district in a real way. The houses on that 300 block of Davis Street were built in the 1870s and 1880s. Then, and I should point out and emphasize that the houses on the north side of Davis in the 300 block remain the same as those constructed, unchanged, improved, painted, with new roofs and everything, but still the same. On the south side, things have undergone considerable change. Originally, the entire south side of the 300 block was one single lot. And that single lot had one exceptionally large house. That exceptionally large house was torn down in 1937, and the construction of houses on the Judson's end of that lot began immediately. Let's see. I should point out that those two lots, 1515 and 1519, those comprise the end tip of this single lot that had prevailed up until 1937. The other houses, those that face Davis Street, begin with my house, 324 Davis, and extend all the way down to the end of the block on the south side of Davis. Those are all built from 1941, as my house was, onward, and they have remained unchanged. The big difference for the time was that garages were entered from the front. That explains two of the three houses. On the middle house, which is quite long, the entry to the garage is in the house itself, but from behind. My main concern with this new proposal is that it is not the kind of thing that represents the consistency that the entire assemblage of houses facing or on the south side of Davis Street have experienced. They've maintained things. It looks as it did 30 years ago and even more. I'm concerned about the setback being reduced to 3 feet from property lines rather than the old standard 5 feet. I'm concerned about the setback of garage in all of its dimensions, both west and east.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment? Mhm. You're signed in?
Can I now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I do it after? Hi, everybody. My name is Omar Salem. I am one of the owners of the house, along with my wife Stephanie and my parents. I'm on the District 65 school board, so I'm used to sitting in your seats, and I'm used to like controversial topics coming up. So I really respect and appreciate that people are coming out and doing this, and I'm used to it, but my family isn't. So I just want to kind of be respectful to that and say that, like, I really hope we can continue to be cordial and good friends and neighbors, regardless of the outcome. So I'll start there. We bought the house with my parents on October 30th, 2020. And our plan at the time was kind of up in the air. We thought about maybe we would rebuild it, we would do an addition. We weren't really sure. My wife and I live at 2005 Maple, and we've been in Evanston for 12 years. My wife grew up here. My mom worked at St. Francis for 36 years or something. So anyway, Evanston is really part of our family, and so I've been begging my parents to move, finally got them to in 2020 with the idea that they can live close to those two that you see back there. All that to say, we didn't know what we were going to do. After my parents enjoyed living there, we kind of put a pause on doing any type of work. We were enjoying where we were living, right on, pretty much on Northwestern's campus. Then I got connected to the Evanston Development Co-op. Peter's here from there. He's the GC. It was a gentleman by the name of Robbie Marcus before that. And we learned about the work that the EDC does. And that's where we learned about ADUs, and after talking to my folks, we realized that was perfect for our family. And that's why we want to do it. And we talked about, we knew that it would probably not be the most popular idea, and so we wanted to make sure we didn't ask for any variances or any zoning relief. We conform to everything that's required in Evanston. Tony, has designed it to make sure that it really fits into the the way it looks is conforming to the historical, zone. So we really appreciate that, it's in a historic district, and we want to be a part of that. We want to be part of that, but also, this house was only built in the 50s. And so I think by doing this, and then hopefully what we can do to the outside of our current house, we can really make that something that really fits in with the neighborhood. And so, the last thing I'll say is this is going to be our forever home. So my wife's grandma recently passed after living in her house for 60 years, and we're unfortunately selling that house. And Stephanie and I have really made a commitment that this will be our forever home. We hope that my children, will be able to raise their family there, and we're just a really part of Evanston, and that's so important to us. So again, I really do appreciate my neighbors coming out. I'm sorry that it has to happen this way, but we really did our best to follow the rules, do it the right, do everything so that it conforms, so that we can live the best way for our family. So thank you all so much.
Okay, and sir, did you want to address any of the design elements or anything like that have been brought up to rebut, giving you an opportunity to rebut any of the items that were already brought up?
I guess just a moment. I mean, I couldn't have put it better than Omar just did on so many levels, but to reinforce the idea that we're not asking for any zoning relief. We're trying to do everything according to the intent of both the zoning ordinance and the new ADU ordinance. And that's it. And I know that was a lengthy process to adopt the ADU ordinance, and it's extraordinarily important, not only for Evanston, but basically universally at this point. I think he put it way better than I could, so thank you.
I have a
Sorry, no, you don't, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, we get to discuss and deliberate. I think if I can start, this is it's a new element. It's a new mass and scale. It's some new materials, but I have to say, I think it is very well done. And I think that my questions that I had about it when I was going through the standards of construction, I thought that it was compatible with the siding, with the block. I thought that it worked well. And so I'm curious what everyone else has, where you all were thinking. But each of the points, I kind of, yes, it's new, yes, it's different than what was there, but in my opinion, it works. So I'm curious what the fellow commissioners say.
So I was part of the pre-review process, and I felt the same way. This is a non-contributing, original, primary residence that, would frankly not be allowed to be built in the way that it's been changed. It isn't in keeping. In fact, this new ADU, in my mind, feels more natural on the block than some of the design elements of the current residence, which is immaterial ultimately, because that's not what's here. The city passed an ADU ordinance because it wanted to introduce affordable housing and the kinds of situations that Omar, is trying to do for his family. And if that's, we have to take that into account in a fulsome way with with our ordinances. So that's how I felt about it. And in terms of zoning, I mean, if they're not asking for any variances here, then that's really not our purview. The setbacks are the setbacks, and that might be unfortunate, but I don't know that that's really our purview.
So I was the one who brought up the question about the setbacks, and when I visited the site today, I noticed there was this natural screening between the two proposed project and the neighboring property. And my concern was that in constructing the new garage, that natural screening could potentially be harmed. And we're talking about less than 6 feet between a bedroom window and another bedroom window, very close together. I understand zoning. I understand there's a certain percentage that they have to have that's, that's built on. And then my concern is that, sure, you can do to a T what the zoning says, but I think also a part of it is being a good neighbor and potentially, instead of going right up to the 3-foot setback, potentially moving the garage some so that there's more light and air between the garage and the house would be a good thing. I don't really know how that affects, because I know that I tried to look at the current garage and the proposed garage, you're actually adding 6 feet to the width of the garage, so your patio space is actually, you're taking 6 feet away from your patio space to build this new garage. But there's something's got to give, because, I want everyone to be cordial, but I also don't want a 2-story garage that's going to be blocking all the northern light for the neighbors, so.
So would you be referring to the construction number 5 standard, rhythm of spacing and structures on streets?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I didn't mean to bring that up, so yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, the screening part that you mentioned, when we take that into account when we're reviewing these, we have to say that that's always temporary. So to your point, we have to assume it might come down or at some point, so that is a concern, the proximity. I definitely think ADUs overall, I support them. I actually have one myself. I think it's a great opportunity to have additional housing in Evanston, but I do have some concerns given the small lot and the proximity to the neighboring property. And I know it sounds like you guys have a good relationship with the neighbors, and I think that's wonderful, but I do think it's best practice to run things by your neighbor. You might have been able to find something that would have been more amenable. Not always, but I personally hate to see people come here to discuss the things that maybe could have happened before they came here.
To that end, the setbacks, could I ask either the architect or the homeowner, like why, like what would be the problem with perhaps like moving it a couple of feet in to give more space, possibly to not damage the root structure? Like, is that possible? Does that, not conform to any other zoning things? Is there a reason why you wouldn't consider doing such a thing?
The only point I'll say to that is that they only have about 2 feet of space. So you're required to have 10 feet of separation between the principal and accessory structures. Right now they're at about 12. So theoretically they could move it 2 feet. Just the other thing I'll always remind commissioners is that you're not making judgments about what the ideal situation is necessarily. What you're doing is you're making judgments on whether something is compatible or not, and whether something fits into its context and is visually compatible with the design vocabularies to which it's related. For example, I agree it's beneficial to have conversations with neighbors as long as we're not voting against something because they're not required to. So I'll just remind commissioners of that.
I think Kate stole most of what I was going to say. So right now, I believe we're at 12-ish feet, and so you can go to 10. But more importantly to me, it's like the discussion about the trees and that's something that's, we're Evanstonians, that's very important to us. So if we do have to, take anything down, our intention would be to put new ones. And so, we would like more space. So again, we did it to conform with what's required of Evanston, and we think we did it appropriately.
So I'm gonna say something, and I know that it's not in our purview, but I know that it was a concern of your neighbors, was the potential of future sale of the property. Sure. and the use of this proposed project. And so my suggestion is potentially putting this garage into a land bank so that it is perpetually affordable. It could be perpetually affordable.
I don't know exactly what that means, but the type of folks that we are sounds like something we'd be interested in. So I don't know what but if that's we're not, we live next to we live behind a frat house right now. We will never rent it to Northwestern Streets, but that is totally something that we could talk about, after this goes on. Again, I don't know exactly what that means. I'd love to, grab coffee with you and learn, but
And I can, if for some reason you're serious and interested in that, I can connect you with someone in the housing division. But
it won't be contingent on the vote.
But certainly, there's no requirement that you do that to meet one of the standards.
But again, it does sound like something Stephanie and I are really interested in. Affordable. We live in the 5th Ward currently. We want affordable housing in Evanston, so I'd love to learn more about that.
Commissioner Allman?
So my first reaction was similar to the other folks that did the pre-review. I looked at it earlier also. I thought, it looks appropriate. There's nothing that jumps out as being problematic. But I think it's what's interesting is that it's part of a context with respect to the house, but it's also part of a context in the neighborhood. And I think part of what we're looking at is its relationship to the environment. So I guess that's standard number one. And I think that word environment probably pops up in a couple of others. So I walked in being prepared to, more inclined to say this, I don't see a problem with this, but I'm looking at sort of the dimensions, and 10 feet, there's actually 2 feet, 10 inches that you could move the building over and you'd still have, the patio. And it seems like 25 feet is sort of maxing out the width. And, I know I'm also an architect, and I know the constraints of making the plan work within the dimensions that you've got. But I wonder if it's worth looking at some of these accommodations, because a few feet here and a few feet there, and all of a sudden, instead of 6 feet, we have 12 feet. And that might create a better rhythm of solid to void. I think that's, I forget which standard we're on there, but I think there's some things that are, I think it's important that we're cognizant of what we're here to talk about, and it's not zoning. It's preservation, and it's the character of the context. And I think there are things that you could do possibly with changes in siting and the size of the garage and the second floor that would, in my mind, make it a bit more appropriate within the context of the neighborhood. I think it's great. I think our challenge, everybody's challenge here, is that seems like we're all on board with ADUs, but we're also all on board for preservation. So we've got to figure out how these things fit together. And I'm not quite sure this is there yet. I actually think it could be. I'm sort of optimistic about it, but I think it's missing on getting some of the proportions right.
I just want to echo that. I think that was very well said, and I agree, because this is a little bit different. This ADU is forward-facing, and most of them aren't. They're usually set back. So while it may conform to all the rules and regs, you have to look at this one more particularly than any other one, because it's like sits side by side with all the other houses. And I agree with you. I personally think there's a possibility that you could get it there, but for me, I don't think it quite works, especially given some of the concerns, legitimate concerns that the neighbors have.
Well, I'd like to make one quick comment. I do find the setback and the scale troublesome, and the impact that it has, not just on the site, but the impact that it has on the neighborhood and the perception of a more open space, and the views and that you experience. So I understand that it is in compliance in all the legal ways, but I think that for a lot of people it may have an ultimate kind of negative impact. I don't know where that falls in terms of consideration. I think that environment, number one, would certainly cover that, but scale and setback are my issues.
Please, go ahead.
The fact that the project, as I understand it, is in legal compliance weighs heavily with me. If it is nevertheless problematic, then there's a problem with our laws and our structures, not necessarily a reason to deny this. Having said that, the couple of comments we've had about the scale of this and the position of it, and that it could be squeezed a little bit, moved a little bit further away from the property boundary, reduced slightly in scale, particularly in width, that does weigh with me. And I wonder whether the way forward here is to not rule out such a development in principle, but to see if there's a way to rework the plans to be a little bit more sympathetic along the lines that we've heard.
Yeah, if I can summarize what I'm hearing, I think what I'm hearing is kind of a move towards a slight revision so that we can get to approval. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from everyone? And it just takes a little bit of tweaking with I don't know about the setback just because it is conforming, but as far as where it sits in relation to the other house, to the main house, any more discussion about that, about how I'm summarizing that?
I would just emphasize that there are a lot of things that are okay for zoning that might be awful for preservation.
Yeah, I would reiterate for the commissioners, for the benefit of the audience too, that I would never say that the zoning supersedes the preservation standards and requirements. I might actually say that it's quite the opposite, that the preservation standards probably overrule the standards for zoning, because what zoning does is it inherently treats every property within the city as a commodity, and what preservation does is it treats everything with individuality, and it's process based. So Just because zoning says it has to be 3 feet away, the standard that you should use is the rhythm of spacing on that street with this new intervention, is it compatible or is it not compatible? I don't think it should matter necessarily that the requirement is 3 feet.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say is what I began with, but didn't say as much about, is I think the design is great. Like, I mean, the layout, and I think the fact that it, you know, to your point, it does face the street. It's not your typical ADU. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. I think it addresses the street the way a coach house would have addressed the street if it were, you know, situated this way. I mean, I think the massing, the windows, the materials are all very appropriate. I think it's just the other issue that I addressed, and I think there is some room for improvement there.
All right.
Sure.
In the process of developing the scheme, and if you wouldn't mind switching to the perspective drawing. There we go. I completely understand the issues of scale, and believe me, I worked it considerably, I mean, multiple iterations. One of the factors I was considering in the process was the heavy screening of green that's to the south of the proposed ADU between that property and 1519. It's super dense. To find the right balance between distance from that property and the principal residence is a real challenge. As we looked at pushing the ADU a little bit farther north, it started to squeeze that space between those two in an uncomfortable way. So I'd be happy to revisit this and show alternative configurations on the site. I'm not sure what it might yield as you're moving this thing, you know, between the two. But it did seem to me like that heavy green screening that exists now between the two properties created sort of a very strong barrier.
Beth, can I ask a question? I'm just wondering, you know, it makes sense ADUs are allowed, but did you look at something where the main structure of the home would have been altered to accommodate a separate dwelling, so we could have just dodged this bullet and then they'd be a little closer to the grandkids?
To do an attached?
Well, or just like a separate entrance, but in addition to the main house.
Right, yeah. In addition to the home that could have been configured in such a way that it still feels like so you wouldn't have the concrete number.
I'm sorry.
Is the term an attached ADU
Yeah, I mean,
or something?
ADUs
or
can
what?
happen within the existing structure. So I'm just curious if that was something that you looked at, or was it like grandparents' ADU? Is there a way to do something with the existing house so we can stay away from the neighbors?
We did discuss that briefly and didn't pursue it deeply.
Yeah, because my comment about the concrete was sort of flippant, but my point was it might even be more cost effective for everybody.
To treat it as an addition.
If there was an addition, so that there might be some concrete, but you're not building a whole new 2-story building. I'm just throwing it out there that this might be a way forward, rather than tweaking the existing the design of the ADU, thinking about it, framing the problem differently, so that we're making a bigger house for all 3 generations, rather than a separate house.
Yeah, I'd have to explore that.
Yeah, I realize you don't. That's above your pay grade.
Well, I mean, we did discuss these things, but didn't pursue them at length.
Yeah, maybe you'll have some new impetus to do that after this hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, I pulled up the Evanston guidelines. They do have what they call interior ADUs or attached to the main house. I mean, just to piggyback on what he said.
Sorry, the public comment period's over. Sorry about that.
I think one suggestion, Tony, if this does come back, would be to try to identify the house on the site plan, the neighboring house.
The neighbor house,
I don't know the exact distance. When I look at the city's map, the GIS maps, which are not 100% accurate, it shows that it's about 7 to 8 feet away from the lot line. It doesn't show it as being 3 feet, so there's some discrepancy in maybe perception and what's actually real. So if we can try to get a measurement for that, that might be helpful.
I'd have to get permission.
It sounds like this one may be continued. Is that where we're leading?
My only concern about continuing it is I feel like we've left them in a pretty vague spot.
We need to
Like,
define it, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, is the problem the setback but not the setback? If it moved 2 feet closer to the house, does that solve it for them? Is it 2 feet closer to the house and 2 feet thinner?
I would say part of the problem is that we don't have the neighboring house on anything that we've seen. So it's impossible, because if we're talking about the relationship of two things, show me the other thing, get back to me.
Okay.
The two neighboring houses, right? The one to the south and to the east.
Yeah, and I think the feedback has been pretty clear that it's proximity and then the scale of the space between the two that needs to be worked on, whether that's, they've got a great architect. I'm sure they'll figure it out.
For me, Tony, I think the only standard I've seen addressed is standard for construction number 5, rhythm of spacing and structures on streets. Sometimes it's helpful, applicants will prepare like a little block study that shows the distances between. Those are obviously can be somewhat estimated, but you could try to do that, and I can share some examples.
Yeah, well, I was just one quick thing. I find it a little bit troubling, almost a little bit dangerous to think that these structures could automatically want to occupy every square inch of space and have that as a goal more than compatibility and neighborhood continuity. But that's all.
Is that construction 10, Charles? Scale of structure, size and mass of structures in relation to open space?
May I just add one more thing? I think that we're looking at the Judson view, but because this is a corner lot, when you're standing on Davis between the house and the next door house, there's space between, and so this garage would be visible from 2 streets essentially. And so right now there's a void or space between this current house and the next door house, and there's visual space that goes all the way down the whole lot line. And with this new garage, it would be filling in part of that void too. So I think that should be taken into consideration too, because it's not just, this isn't just the public right of way is on 2 streets because it's a corner lot.
Okay, so given our concerns about standards for construction number 5, rhythm of spacing and structures on streets, and number 10, scale of a structure, would you be interested and willing to come back and work with staff on the Preservation Commission to provide some more information about, the distances between the neighbors and that kind of stuff? Maybe even some scenarios where the setbacks are changed minimally or, are changed. Is that something that you would be open for?
I'm open to finding a compromise.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a conversation we have.
Can you please step up to the podium, Tony? Sorry. Yeah, it just doesn't catch on the mic. Yeah.
I'm completely open to finding a compromise. Yeah, but I, of course, have to feel out where they stand on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's up to the chair. You wanna ask? Okay.
If you're open to the discussion with staff, then I think that will help move this forward, because I think we all want to see this. I think we want to figure out a way to make it work, but with a couple, both being able to address those two standards in particular.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, is there a commissioner who will make a motion to continue?
I think he did you?
All right. Thank you. And seconded? Yes?
Who made the original motion? Sorry.
Oh, I thought
Did
you
Matthew move to continue?
I believe I seconded, but I'm really.
Do you need me to say the,
Yes,
say the
please.
words?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, in the case of 24 Pres 0046, 1525 Judson Avenue in the Lakeshore Historic District, I make a motion for, can I just say a continuance on the project?
I think that's right.
And applicable standards, demolition 1 to 5 and construction 1 to 14 and 16.
I second that.
May I amend the motion just to focus on construction standards 5 and 10?
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Well, we need a quick vote.
We need a vote. Thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those who oppose and abstain? All right. Motion carries. It'll be continued then for,
June
For June.
11th? I'll reach out to you tomorrow, Tony. Okay.
okay, great, thank you. All right, moving on to our second case. It's 24 Pres 0047. Kay, do you want to read that one into the record?
Case number 24 PRS 0047, 1630 Ashland Avenue, a landmark in the Ridge Historic District. Peter Cady, an architect and applicant on behalf of the homeowner, requests a certificate of appropriateness to demolish an existing attached single-car garage, restore the home's first floor north elevation, including restoration of the original brackets below the second floor bay, and construct a new tandem two-car attached garage toward the home's west rear volume. The applicant further requests the following major zoning variations. 1, a north interior side yard setback of 1 foot where 5 feet is required and 6 inches is the existing legally nonconforming condition. Code section 6828A3. A rear yard setback of 3 feet where 30 feet is required and 28 feet is the existing legally nonconforming condition. Code section 6828A4. The applicable standards are alteration 1 through 10, demolition 1 through 5, and construction 1 through 7 and 7 through 15. The Preservation Commission is the determining body for the certificate of appropriateness. The Preservation Commission may, at its discretion, make a recommendation to the Land Use Commission, the determining body for the proposed zoning relief per Code Section 219-4E. It's a mouthful. Peter, when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Our proposal is to...
Can you state your name, please, for the
I'm sorry,
record?
I'm Peter Kading, architect for an applicant for this project at 1630 Ashland. The proposal is to demolish an existing attached one-car garage that we believe was built around 1951. It's attached to an original 1889 William Boyington house. We have a pretty good rendering showing what it looked like originally. We've previously done a project to change the original porch from shingled railing that had been added at some point to what the rendering depicts as a railing with columns and spindles. What we'd like to do is remove the existing one-car garage, which will reveal the existing brackets, 2 of which are intact within the garage, 2 of which have been cut pretty severely for the garage door track, and there's some photos later on, and then rebuild the garage with a more traditional gabled roof towards the rear of the property. Somewhere in the property description, I think under the setting heading, it's noted that the property was originally much larger, that the houses to the north and the south are not contributing structures, and then the house to the west of it also is not probably contributing or original structure. There's very little room in the backyard. We're proposing to keep the north setback approximately the same. We added just a little bit, only to hopefully add a little bit of room to help us build this. In the rear, we put a 3-foot setback also just to give us a little bit of space between the existing back fence and where the new garage would be located. So this is the front view. As you can see, you can see the brackets in the front view, and you can see how the garage sort of tucks into the back. If we could keep going forward. That's the existing south facade. So I should mention the existing original house is brick on the first story with a shingled second story. The rear portion of the house is entirely shingled. It may have at one point been a porch that was enclosed. I haven't found any evidence one way or another, but it's definitely not in the original rendering, and so it's sort of tacked onto the back a little bit. So you can see here the garage. It's a pretty long element, but it's all really in the back. This view wouldn't be visible from the street at all. Go to the next one. The rear view, also not visible from the street. You can see the roof is asymmetric, and the reason I did that was to give us the nice gable view from the street and to keep the south side of the garage off the existing window there that is within a family room. This is the existing garage. You can see it's just sort of pasted over the original house. So we moved the garage completely off the original house, which reveals the original brackets, the original shingled bottom of the loggia, and there's currently a door there. We want to replace that door with something a little bit more practical for exterior use. So this is the rendering I was mentioning, which is pretty fantastic. It shows everything that was originally there. You can see the brackets, and there's a photo of the brackets there, almost exactly as originally drawn. The porch, we did a pretty decent job of getting back to what it was originally. There's a few things that are slightly different, oval windows, some decorations, that kind of stuff, but this rendering is so close to what's there, it's pretty incredible. So you can see there's the porch that we did on the left. The railing, like I said, was a shingled, half wall. There's the garage. I know the condition report says that it's sort of well integrated and tucked in, and I guess that's a matter of opinion. It works fine. It serves its purpose. It doesn't serve its purpose well for a modern car. It's extremely close space. I don't think that they ever really park in it. It's just filled with, bikes and sports equipment. These are just context photos. So the house to the north does have a concrete driveway that's a couple, 2-3 feet off the property line, and then there's a concrete driveway before the house. And then to the right, that is Church Street. This is 1618 Ashland, which is 2 houses to the south. And you can see it has the same loggia with, the brackets are a different style. They are kind of spindly. They're pretty interesting, but it's exactly the same. It's the same architect, and it's the same design feature. And then you can see in the garage here, it's a little bit distorted, but you can see we have a couple intact brackets, and then you can see where the brackets were just lopped off for the garage door track. And it's pretty hard to see in this, but you can actually see above the brackets the boards, which I believe are the bottom of the existing loggia. We haven't done any demolition, but we're hoping to find, pretty much the loggia structure and everything intact, because you can literally see the boards, and the rest of the garage is just, smooth drywall or plaster. These are some 3D models we did of the project. They're a little rough. Battered walls are hard to draw in 3D, but they give you an idea of the scale of the garage compared to the original house.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
My first question was the bracket. So I was trying to figure out when I was looking at the photos, you said it's the garage door that's why they cut
The track, it's literally the track, yeah, the two
Okay.
tracks, they just, I don't know, sawzalled them off.
Right. So is that where, like, I'm just wondering, how's a car going to get by there? Like, this is not, I guess this isn't a preservation concern. This is more like a.
Yeah, so
Especially in 80.
I saw your comments in the pre-review.
Okay.
And so we would, I had one 3D view with like a 3D car, and they're like a Jeep, and Maria has like a Hyundai, big SUV that's actually smaller than the one I had in there. It does fit under there. So if you're in the brackets photo, you can see that the two are intact, and you can get a car in there, but it's just, it's close. And I guess as a matter of, it's definitely usable. You can definitely get past it. I think that with not having to park right next to it, you'll be able to maneuver actually a little bit better. Whether somebody would ultimately want to put some sort of bollard or something to sort of, provide a little protection for a car driving by, I'm not sure. But it does work. The reason the brackets were cut were not for the car. It was just to hang this garage door in there. Because you can, I guess, what's not clear, you can see the door is in the middle of the four brackets right there. So the first two brackets going to the east are cut, and then the next two brackets to the west of the door, which you can see in the bottom right corner, those are intact.
But your plan is to restore those, right? The ones that were cut?
Yeah, definitely to restore the ones that were cut.
And you think a car can make it under there, you're saying, without
Yeah,
decapitating the driver?
yeah, definitely a car can make it under there. But it's sort of like any driveway that goes past the side of a house. Could you swerve and go down the side of your house and do a lot of damage? Of course, but I don't really see it being much different than any sort of driveway that goes by a house, which is a pretty common thing. And definitely an SUV would fit under there because I looked up the measurements and it does work.
And I had a question just about the decision to do the tandem garage. Was there the option, just with the room in the back of the house, to do side by side, but have it not attached to the house, but like a detached garage toward the back that would be side to side cars? I can't tell exactly if there's room for that, but how was the tandem decided upon?
So I don't think there's room to put a two-car garage in the back. I'm not sure.
Like you drive back and around, basically.
Right. There could be a theoretical option to do a new curb cut and put a large garage somewhere in that south yard.
Oh,
which would.
That's different.
I don't think as far as preservation goes, it would be a good decision. I think it would add an element that would not contribute to the house. I think it would detract from the house. The distance in the back, like you said, to try and do some sort of roundabout and do an attached garage in the back, I don't think it probably works. I'm not saying it's 100% it doesn't work, but it wouldn't work easily.
Okay.
Sorry, just to piggyback on that, or even a two-car garage, like you'd go down that long driveway and then you'd splinter off into two, like setback on the property. I don't know how tight, I don't know what the dimensions are there, but I think people are kind of responding to the tandem is so long and looks a little bit unusual, I guess. So anyway, I was wondering if you had Is there any way to get that back, a two-car back there, and drive a long driveway, or too tight? I don't know.
I think it's definitely too tight. Turning cars is, if you design parking garages or something like that, there's radiuses that you need to really figure out, and I'm just not sure how you would, get a garage back there. I think it essentially would become, because I do not actually know the setback to that, because it's in the report, is 28 feet to the back of the house. So say a garage is 24 feet wide, and there's this, you have sort of a point at the corner there where you're trying to turn around it, and, you're talking about having to do a 3-point turn out of your garage every time or something like that.
That's not what I mean, but it's fine.
I guess I'm just trying
yeah.
to figure, maybe I'm not figuring it clearly, but to get a garage that you had entered from the north is what you're saying.
No, I wasn't actually. That you would enter, like you're just driving westbound, and you just, one car goes straight in and one car kind of turns,
Yeah, like I said, I think the radius is probably deceiving for you to be able to turn. You would still fill that whole backyard, which is.
I think most of the yard is those side, right? Like that whole, I'm familiar with the property.
Yeah.
The big yard is like the side yard rather than the back piece.
Yeah. And I guess part of what I see, and I know it's not a permanent element, is that there's currently like a 6-foot privacy fence along that lot line, because it really is a backyard, and it's a backyard for the house to the north. And most of the garage is going to likely either be behind a fence, or it's going to serve as a fence between the two houses.
I have a question about the roof form of the garage. How did you end up with that decision of, how it meets the main house?
So if you can see, the slope of the garage is similar to the slope of the north face of the garage. The slope is similar to the slopes on the front of the house. And so then what I wanted to do is, you can see where it's a standard size, standard 7-foot garage door. So we start at a standard height there, and we rise up to the bottom of the brick there. And then the reason it becomes asymmetric is there's some existing windows on the back that we wanted to stop the garage short of, so that we weren't covering the whole back of the house, because that's where the family room is.
Oh, so you're matching the slope of the front porch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I had to think for a second when I looked at the perspective. I'm like, I think that, I'm 90% sure that that's what I did, but now looking at this perspective, it looks goofy.
Any more questions?
Personally, I think it's a huge improvement from what's there, and the idea that this elevation that you can see from the public way really well is going to be returned to its original glory. I think is really fantastic. I mean, that you could leave this there. That's within her purview, or you could do this in a way that really is an asset to the neighborhood, and I'd be interested in, if anyone else has anything to say about this, but, you're preserving the ability of the homeowner to park their car in a garage in the least offensive way possible, I think, and also contributing to the principal residence by bringing it back to its original glory.
Right. That's when I looked at some of the demolition standards, and they're like, will this adversely affect the look of the house? And I'm like, well, it's going to do the exact opposite of what, the demolition standards are trying to prevent.
I also like the fact that you've actually minimized the amount of non-permeable surface. If you move the garage further back or whatever, you still have to have a driveway, which means more concrete. Less concrete, in my opinion, is better.
Sure. Yeah. In the way that garage is currently set, there's just the concrete strips for the cars, and so the simplest thing to do is to extend them, and hopefully improve some of the landscaping, in between the garage spaces, whether that's some sort of permeable block or just simple grass. I don't know that we've talked about that too extensively.
Any other questions for the applicant before we move to public comment?
This may be a little bit out of left field, but you're very close to the lot line there. In time of storm, aren't you just tipping rainwater into your neighbour's yard?
Well, so this is preservation. Once it goes in for permit, Ingrid will, of course, make sure that I supply a grading plan that says that I will not contribute any water to my neighbor's property. So whether that's, obviously I'll have a gutter on that long facade, and how that will be routed will be a concern or a question.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone here for a public comment? Yes.
Hello, I am Shannon Cyberling at 1632 Ashland, the house just to the north here. Yes. And my concern is not with the design. The design looks like it would improve the neighborhood. My concern is whether it would require workmen or later on passengers to step out of their cars on to my property. The property line has not been firmly established between the two houses. So, and also, as the architect mentioned, the idea that maybe the driveway would need to be wider in order for cars, say SUVs or something, to get underneath the balcony that's there. So the question is, where the current fence is, the current privacy fence that he mentioned, may not be on the property line. I think it's possibly over on my side of the property line, but we haven't a firmly established property line, and I think it should be firmly established before any work begins. I don't want to establish this is the way we've always done it kind of easement between the two properties.
Kate, was there a plat of survey that was, I mean, that would be the document that would settle that question?
That's what I'm pulling up right now.
I will say that plats can vary from neighbor to neighbor. I'm having this right now with my current neighbor. Our plats say some different things, so that sometimes does happen. I don't know how that gets resolved. There's title insurance and other things, but you will have one plat to look at. She may have another plat.
Yes, I plan to have a survey soon because I do plan to sell my house within a year, and I want to be able to assure a new buyer that there is a firmly established property line, and that the neighbors are not necessarily needing to step over it in order to get out of their cars, for example, depending upon how close the driveway actually is to the property line. Again, it's not a quarrel with the architectural design. It's whether they're going to have, what property they're going to have to use in order to create it.
You're just seeing if there is an actual plat. Do you know that you have one already?
While we're waiting, is it okay if I read into the record what Commissioner Cohen sent us, just so that, because he did spend, as Kate said, he did spend some considerable time.
The only reason I wouldn't is because I paraphrased some of that conversation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I can attach those comments after and make that known. But yeah, it was not like a word for word copy and paste.
This is outside of the purview of our preservation, but just as a neighbor here, we're all neighbors. If you're selling your house and they need 6 more inches to make a design work? I mean, did you guys talk about this?
No, we haven't established the property line. That's really the problem. Are they going to, and can I assure a future owner that the property line is secure and that the people next door, I don't know whether there's enough room for them to get, say, an SUV down that driveway. I don't know whether there's enough room for people stepping out of the car, particularly on the passenger side of the car, to avoid walking on somebody else's property.
So this shows, I'm looking at it right now, the edge of your concrete driveway, ma'am, is 3 feet north of his property
Well, it
line.
isn't quite 3 feet.
And then-
It's a couple few inches, but we don't know.
Well, I'm
There
looking,
is a
but I'm
survey
looking at the,
mark
I'm
on
looking at
front.
the survey, and then there's a fence towards the rear half of the property.
Yes, and
That
we are
says
not
it's,
sure
it's
that
a
that
1 foot north of his lot line.
My fence is
So the
one-
fence is on your property, and there's 1 foot in between the fence and the edge of his property.
Yes. I think so.
That's what
At
it-
least,
mhm.
that's according to their survey, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Which was done about 4 years ago, I believe,
I can look at the date.
maybe 3. It was
2020
done
is the
at the
date.
time the house was sold and the survey was given.
Almost 4 years ago, August of 2020.
Yes.
And just to confirm, your design was based on that plot of survey.
We're not proposing to build on the property to the north, and the driveway
Yeah.
is proposed to continue what's existing, so it's no closer to the lot line than it currently is.
Well, we'll get the property line established, maybe marked would be a good idea, so that somebody building the driveway isn't going to have to put footings or something over the property, yeah.
Typically, the city requires when you do an addition to
If you just step back up to the podium.
Yeah.
I also don't generally encourage a dialogue and back and forth between, between the applicant and property owner, but so if we can clarify this point.
Sure, I just wanted to say that typically when you build a property, the city requires a spot survey to make sure that your foundation ended up where it was supposed to end up.
Actually, I think,
And what,
I
okay,
think
and
Evanston-
the other question is, can your people use it?
I said we don't do that anymore.
right, I was just going to say that we don't do that anymore, but that would be maybe in everybody's best interest to do that here. I mean, here's my 2 cents. I think from a preservation point of view, it restores some really nice features of the house, which is great. I think that's what we're encouraging. And it not only does that, but it kind of like pulls a mass away that didn't really fit there. There was a prominent architectural feature that was occluded, and that's exposed. And the addition of the garage in terms of its massing and its style and materials fits with the character of the house. So I think from a strictly preservation point of view, I think, another good job. The porch was a good job. But it seems to me that since this has to go to Land Use Commission, that's really the question. Your question, ma'am, is it has to do with that line.
The
And so
use
that's
of
really
the
not even for us to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not with the design.
Right.
The
Yeah.
design is fine.
Yeah.
The question is it usable for future owners of both houses unless, and can I assure a new owner that nobody is currently walking across their property in order to get out of their cars or get in and out of their driveway?
Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to mention, I know Commissioner Cohen had asked, he was reading his comments, something about, had you thought about a single car garage to keep it more compatible? I know that might not be as desired, but not every home, historic home especially, has a 2-car garage.
Hi, I'm the owner of the property. So
That was I don't know, sorry, directed at, yeah, but then you can step up.
One of the goals of the project was to increase the space for cars, because currently the garage is not used, so there's one car that's parked in the driveway, there's a second car that's parked in the street. So the hope is to get the cars off the street, get the cars into the garage so that the garage can be used, the door can be closed. They've had numerous thefts from the garage, because the other part that happens is that the garage covers the side entrance to the house, which is the main entrance to the house, because it goes into sort of the kitchen and family room areas. So they'd like to be able to have a garage in the back where they could store 2 cars, and in addition, you know, bike and sports equipment and sort of modern amenities for a family.
Thank you. And would you like to speak to that as well? Yeah, sure.
So I think the idea here, I did a lot of research on the history of the house at the Dawes Historical Foundation. I found the original drawing. I have all the documentation that the Historic Society has on the house. The garage was permitted in 1951, and we finally referred to it as a lean-to, because it really does look like it was just kind of shoved on the side of the house. It's not. I've only parked a car in it once, and I wasn't able to shut the garage door, and it was only like a hailstorm that I was concerned about. So the goal of the project is to be able to park a car in the garage. And as Pete mentioned, we have had a lot of things stolen out of that garage over the last year, and actually behind the garage. We've had 2 lawnmowers stolen out of behind the garage, and then 4 bikes stolen from the front of the garage when it was left open. So the hope is by pushing it a little bit back from the street, and then we have a window you can see on the side that is in our kitchen, so we would be able to see people coming in and out. So that was part of the goal of the project. In terms of being able to do it side by side in the backyard, it is very narrow, as you pointed out. So like turning the car, and that's why we decided on like a 1.5 width of it, and the tandem front and back, so that the width would have a little bit of extra space for storage, and then the 2 cars would fit front to back. So that was what we did. And in terms of the southern view, the idea there is to landscape the walls and put landscaping all around it, so you wouldn't actually see it from any of the sides that are currently there. And then in terms of the north, it would then, right now, the fence, it needs to be removed anyways, so it would come back to the property line. Good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think where we are, I mean, there's not, I mean, because this is a unique situation, you know, where the only public view is from the front. And so I think it's laudable that they're restoring the brackets, and I think it meets the standards. It's great. The only thing that I have is that when it comes to the recommendation to the land use, is that the views from other sides are where I have problems with, you know, the length of the garage that may have not met standards, but because it's not a public right-of-way, we can't really speak to it. So in that way, I don't know how a recommendation works, other than just saying it's laudable that they are restoring the brackets, and that was our focus, so that the Land Use Commission doesn't know that by approving this, we're not approving the garage because it met all the standards. You know, because they're going to, I don't know if they know that we're not looking at it in 360, we're just looking at it from the one view.
I imagine we could clarify that with our, in our recommendation to them.
So it isn't, I'm just wondering, it's not viewed, there's a big side yard, and I'm not sure how much of it you can see looking back. Probably, I mean, I have walked past it, but there's no garage there today, so I'm not sure how much is from the public view, the new garage.
I went out there several times, and I don't think you could probably see the side of that garage from the Just the rear volume of the home and the addition on the side, it just seems to
Because it's been
obstruct it
so
to me.
deep. Okay.
But visibility from the north elevation and the east elevation of it, I think certainly.
So the north as well, the whole length of that, I mean, I guess is that within, are you saying the north side is within the purview? That would be the whole length? So that is, I mean,
Yeah, I would say that you can see that side
Line.
elevation from the sidewalk.
yeah, okay. So, that, yes, it is, yeah.
So we are including the north side elevation of the new garage in our consideration. With that in mind, then I do agree with one of the comments that came from one of our other commissioners about the window on the north. And it just being kind of a solitary, single, unrelatable window. And just, I just don't know if it matched anything. Not that it has to match anything, but just if it really complemented the proportions. And but hold on, I'm looking for the standard.
I think there's also a about directionality. Let me look, see.
The standard for
proportion.
construction number 3, proportion of openings. I just kind of see that as a new design element kind of popped in there. And so I think there's some opportunity to maybe do something different that has some, a different relationship, that has a relationship. And then my other just question for you was it relates to, oh, shoot, I can't find that standard right now. My concern was that when you take down the existing garage and that brick wall that's been painted white is going to stand out a lot from the remaining original wall that has the red brick. And so just using the gentlest means possible to remove that paint. That's one of our standards is using the gentlest means possible. Thank you. Number 7. Alteration standard number 7 of using the gentlest means possible to get that whole elevation looking really smart.
Yep. The tricky part about that north facade is that the reality is that you could put additional design elements, additional windows that could relate perhaps better to the house, but they're not going to be functional. They're going to, like I said, there's a fence there. The fence is going to be taken down and it's going to be replaced. So you're really putting in windows that are going to be 12 inches from a 6-foot fence. That's currently what's there. I assume that's probably what's allowed to be, replaced with. It's on the neighbor's property, as we know, so it's them. But, the idea was to break it up a little bit. I sort of just took a cue from the existing garage and put sort of a side window in there that gives a little bit of light to the interior of the garage. But to try and take something in an element from the house, some of these larger windows, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of windows on this house, so I suppose you could find something. Those 2 little windows to the left and right of the loggia,
Yeah, are those fixed?
I believe they're fixed. But I don't know that really, we could definitely entertain possibilities of different things you could put on that facade. But like I said, to put in, say, 4 windows and break it up down the line, which I don't know if it really works with the house, or, to do something where you have a centered element. Like on the south facade, there's also a centered element that's in the dining room. It's a lot of expense for something that's just going to be obscured and is not, it is somewhat visible from Church Street, but it is a whole house away. So you are sort of currently looking through multiple trees and vegetation, and right now you're looking into a 6-foot fence, so.
Okay, no,
I-
point
But,
taken on.
but
I think
just,
this, oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
but the fence is, just to be clear, that's considered temporary. Like anything like that, we're not supposed to like consider a fence, like, because it can be taken down tomorrow. So-
Fences, yeah, fences,
can't- that's-
vegetation,
Exactly.
masonry walls are not considered permanent obstructions to line of sight.
So that shouldn't be in our consideration, like, oh, there's a fence, so we don't need to make it
There's a f-
look compatible, like, we still do.
There's a functional consideration, obviously. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, because when we sat down and talked about this, your desire was no fenestration on that elevation, I think, and I had made a suggestion that to help break down the scale of that facade, to integrate some kind of fenestration into it. Not necessarily this window, but that consideration, I think, came from me. You might entertain having a solid wall. I'm not sure.
And I guess at this scale too, that is 2 windows, side by side there as opposed to 1 window.
Yeah.
And there's sort of a little bit different scale. There's a double window on the front of elevation that,
So I don't think we're proposing additional windows. There's a window to the left of the side door, I think for a basement window, that I think is 6 lights.
yeah, it's a glass block
It's
window.
glass block?
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, if that proportion or that shape could be placed where the current,
We're saving you money with a smaller window.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I'm happy to put, obviously, if, that is a glass block window, which I don't know if there's any way to do a glass block window by the energy code anymore. I think that may be completely impossible. But we wouldn't obviously put a glass block window, and it wouldn't be a window with, that many panes in it. So, but we could definitely do smaller windows like that. We could break it into a couple windows, spaced apart. All those things are option. I don't think they're objectionable necessarily, but I'm just trying to look at the scale because, when they put in a glass block window like that, it was obviously at one point some sort of glass window that they infilled some of the frame, and you can see that it has a nice brick arch over it. And it's, the scale of the windows are probably pretty close, actually. But I could definitely work off that scale if that was something that was desired.
Yeah, I just think the windows kind of are long, like they view long versus like vertical, and I think you could make it look more compatible if they were more vertical windows, less horizontal window there.
so I believe that's, where is it? Construction Standard 11, directional expression of facades.
Yes, thank you.
So could we move forward with COA approval with a recommendation to work with staff to change the windows, change them to 2 windows, change them to 1 window? How do people feel about that?
I don't have a strong feeling about 1 or 2, just the window, those proportions are closer to the windows in the house.
And I'm okay with a staff review to get that done.
Great, yeah.
Is that for you all?
Cool.
I'll be okay with that.
Then I'll make a motion that we go ahead and move forward with a certificate of appropriateness for 1630 Ashland.
Given the provision that we have a staff review of the window fenestration, or the fenestration on the north side.
Here, here.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? All right, all those opposed? Oh. I was going to say, wait a minute, did we get your vote? Yay? Okay, and yourself? I'm going to abstain. Okay. Okay. All right, motion carries.
And so, are we as a commission going to not make a recommendation to the Land Use Commission? Or or I just want to know how we're going to handle that. I mean, we don't have to, it's not required, but I feel like it, they sometimes look towards what the commission has to say, and so if we give them some summary of what we said, that would be helpful, I think. But I'm open to hear whatever anyone else has to say.
You have some reservation. You have a reservation that you haven't fully communicated. I'd like to, I mean, why would you?
Well, it's just because I'm only reviewing it from the one view, and I didn't understand that the north facade until tonight was part of that. And so I just wanted to personally communicate to the Land Use Commission that that was what was done, was that we only looked at the western, to the front and the side north.
You say we, but I looked at it.
Well, I know, but
Didn't
it's,
find objection.
okay.
And I guess I can speak to the zoning variation. It's relatively confusing, so I don't. You can give a positive recommendation. If you're giving a positive recommendation, you're not saying that it meets the standards that the Land Use Commission uses. What you're saying is that they are seeking relief from the zoning ordinance to do something to the benefit of the architectural integrity of this house. And that benefit is not injurious to neighboring properties in some way. If you are declining to make a recommendation one way or the other, you're essentially just deferring those aspects of the matter to the Land Use Commission, that there is no relationship between what they're requesting and the integrity of the house or historic preservation. In very rare cases, you can give a negative recommendation if you think that the relief someone is seeking is to the detriment of historic preservation. So those are kind of the options that you have.
Then maybe there's a little bit more discussion here, because I feel like the improvement to that facade would recommend it. It's not neutral. It's actually, from a preservation point of view, better. So like you said, we're not talking about it from a zoning point of view. If they want our opinion, if it makes things better from a preservation point of view, I think my opinion is yes. So I would amend the recommendation.
And just to clarify, they're two separate motions, so you don't
Okay.
have to amend it.
Right.
It would just
Okay.
be
So I would
additional motion.
I would move to recommend it to the Land Use Commission, because it makes an improvement in terms of preservation.
I second it.
Is there more discussion? Okay. You were making a motion to do that, to make that our recommendation.
I am, yeah.
Okay. You second, I'm sorry, got it. I'm caught up now. All right, all those in favor? And all those opposed? And abstaining?
Abstaining should be that you're uncomfortable one way or the other. There should be a reason for the abstination.
That's not
which
my
is-
reason.
Well, and typically someone would state what that is, so that for the record, we typically
There's been other
ask
people who
why.
have abstained without giving reasons. They just don't vote. I'm happy to share that with you, like, out of this.
I mean, it can be as much as just saying there's a conflict of interest.
There's a conflict of interest.
Wonderful, thank you. And Carl?
Fine, I'll vote no.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. I will work with you, Peter, to schedule. I've not scheduled your Land Use Commission hearing, so that'll be the next steps, and we'll work on that. Yeah, they can run somewhat simultaneously, those two things. I'm not worried about the window. It isn't really a zoning issue, so we can work on that, and then I can schedule the case. Great.
Thank you. All right, we typically do take a break at 2 hours. Would everybody like that break? And we can reconvene in 5 minutes? Okay, so everyone come on back at 9:16. Hear ye, citizens of Evanston. All right, we are moving on to item 5 on the agenda, approval of meeting minutes. Kate, did you receive any commentary on the,
I did not receive any comments on the meeting minutes.
any comments right now from anyone on the meeting minutes from last month? No? All right, then they will stand on record as is. Moving on to the staff reports. Cade, take it away.
These will be really brief. I did just want to update everyone that if you didn't see it, we released the May newsletter, which I thought the content was pretty exceptional this time. I think it worked out really well. We had a pretty significant increase in people who read it. So we had about, I just looked, it was about 1,400 people, which is almost exactly half of the subscribers, but that's really successful. And then some of the highlights were a lot of individuals clicked on the Cultural Heritage Awards, and then there was a significant amount of people that also clicked on the little bio that people put together for Carlos's career. So I think there's a nice connection there as well. And then the Mother's Day House Walk was also like, people were like, oh, this is a thing. Maybe they signed up. I heard it was very successful this year. And then the next newsletter will go out, let's see, May, sometime in August or maybe September. August is a tough month, so September makes probably more sense. And that's also an opportunity then to publicize the individuals that actually were nominated and chosen for awards, or to publicize whatever event we're planning for that. And then the other staff report was just the Cultural Heritage Awards themselves. I have received some interest already, which is a good thing. It was written up in the roundtable, which is nice. The city did a press release for it. It was in our newsletter. One of the things I hear relatively consistently from people that have reached out is just how big of a change it is, and in a good way, but they're just like, wow, this is like a lot different than what it used to be. There is a nomination form if anyone is interested. I know the city's communications team is developing a digital flyer that we can use to help publicize this.
And when are nominations due?
And nominations are due the second week of August, so there's a significant amount of time between then and now. It will go quickly, but any help promoting this, I think, would be to our benefit. I know.
Have we reached out to like the Maine Dempster Mile folks and like those kind of business associations?
That kind of stuff is definitely on my radar. I just haven't done it yet. Part of the reason for that is I was tending to kind of wait for that digital flyer just to send it out, but I can check on that. If not, it doesn't hurt just to tell people and send the nomination form that has a lot of info. And then I know the other thing that we're doing to promote this is Sarah, as the chair, is going to go to the Arts Council on, I think that might be next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, so I think that's a nice kind of cross-pollination between what they do and what we do, and a significant portion of this is trying to celebrate the arts generally as a form of cultural heritage, which I think could be very successful, and hopefully they can help us get that word out too, that this is very different than it's been before, and it's not just about architecture. And I think that's it for my staff reports. They're pretty simple.
May I just say that I was happy to see the architectural, if you can find the architectural feature in the email. And my suggestion to Cade was that we continue that, and so that eventually there could be a scavenger hunt put together of multiple, so.
Yeah, that was, I'll give credit to Commissioner Jacobs. He came up with that idea. He wants to continue doing it. That was another one where I already had maybe 8 people that reached out, and they're like, I know where that is. I know that building. Like, I love it. And his thought then is to, in the following newsletter, give information on the building, its history, its cultural significance, and then have another one that people can go out and look for. So I won't say anything else. I don't want to give it away in case somebody wants to look at it. But I think that was really well received. Even a couple people, a couple reporters reached out, and they're like, that was a great idea. So that was a good one. Good job, John.
All right, we are to our last item, but we actually, I believe, already covered this, the discussion item about the consortium and Corps of Volunteers. Anything else to bring up about that? Yeah. Yes, just,
Sarah Driller, Evanston homeowner, landmark, sometime landmark commissioner. Because I knew that I had limited time during the public comment section, I focused only really on the webinar and giving you guys some context for why I attended it and why we should care. But the other half of that piece, this discussion item, is actually about the Corps of Volunteers. And I was hoping to have more to tell you, but hopefully there are some rules and procedures coming that we can talk about in the next month or two to try to formalize a Corps of Volunteers. The consortium and the Corps of Volunteers is the kind of same general set of ideas. This notion of finding ourselves some help so that we don't have to just us take on everything, that we can take on everything, but we don't have to do it all ourselves, that we involve more of the community and that we formalize that in some way. So
Is this like the Preservation League that the gentleman tonight mentioned? Is it related to that idea? Do you know anything about the Preservation League as it existed at one time?
So I can't speak to that. I do believe that the Preservation League was a member of the consortium, right? So it wasn't that, so the Preservation League was one of the partners for the commission. So this is really attempting to kind of create an infrastructure of collaboration and discussion and partnership, which would be not just the commission asking the nonprofits to do stuff for us, but to dialogue. Because we don't really have that in Evanston so much right now as a kind of formal structure as far as I know. And the consortium used to meet on a regular basis and actually do this pretty important work, but it was all staff.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question? The Preservation Consortium, or the Preservation
The consortium,
predated the commission, right?
No, I don't think so. My understanding is it was something that happened, I don't know how frequently in the past, but it was
quarterly.
It was quarterly when I knew that it was a thing.
Yeah.
Where basically it was just all the various partner organizations and the staff member from the commission. They would just talk about what initiatives they were doing, how they could assist each other. They weren't trying to duplicate efforts, trying to create efficiencies, find ways to promote each other's events.
The difference now is that we have Preserve 2040, so we have a kind of common ground that we can use as a kind of touchstone, all of us, potentially. The other thing, of course, is that I shouldn't say of course, I would like to see the consortium include a wider range of voices than perhaps it did in the past. So I'm hoping to be a little bit more open-minded about what defines what a partner is. I think the Rebuilding Warehouse might be a great type of partner for us. It's not a traditional preservation partner per se, but it's the kind of thing which, if we were to revive the consortium, we could bring them into the conversation and have them there on a regular basis. Not everybody, every member, but just, the executive director of this one and the executive director of that one and whoever they could send and just get together and have a conversation. But if we put it on staff, if we keep putting everything on staff, we're not going to get much done.
And I would say that we could reach out, like you said, to not formal organizations, but I'm thinking like there are potentially block clubs that we could reach out to that may want to
Right.
talk about a conservation district idea and that's a way of getting community input
Right.
that way, so.
Right, that's the, I didn't want to say too much to kind of lead you all, because I want those, ideally you guys would have ideas like that and contribute them. Because the other thing, of course, is that we want, and I keep saying of course, as if you're all on board with my ideas, but just kind of pushing outside of our bubble a little bit and sort of not questioning some of the assumptions about who we think might be interested, and just sort of make the ask and let them decide if they want to come to us. So that was sort of the idea, but it's still forming in my head, and it's going on sort of parallel with this notion of a volunteer corps as part of the rules and regs, which hasn't been, which we talked about earlier in the year also, and hasn't quite made its way through law yet, and back to us. So that's coming.
And maybe, to your point earlier, Charles, there was which predated the commission, helped form the commission, and then after, when the commission was advisory and they were very successful in this community, there was a massive amount there was like this huge volunteer structure that existed, somewhat similarly to the movement you see now in sustainability. It was, preservation had its moment in the 70s and 80s. And I think it was very successful. There were people that didn't necessarily want to or didn't have the volunteer capital to sit on the commission, but were willing to invest their time when they could on certain initiatives. And they were rewarded at the time by being called associate members of the commission. And it was a nice program that was taken away from the commission at one point in time. We're now empowered to do that again. But I think that momentum and traction kind of stalled. And I think trying to regain that as we move forward some new initiatives or steer preservation in a slightly different direction, I think could be impactful.
So
Emily Guthrie, you know Emily, most of you guys know, has told me that she was involved in an effort and that was similar to the kind of work we do, but it was totally volunteer. And it would be interesting to hear her take on this idea. I was going to mention also the Save Harley Clark effort, and now that was an attempt to save a historic building that lasted really long and got very much involved in a lot of things. But I don't know if that's the kind of effort you were thinking about in terms of volunteerism, because that involved people. I mean, to the point that there was actually a referendum on the ballot. I mean, you don't get much more dedicated and serious in terms of historic preservation than that kind of activity.
The Corps of Volunteers idea will be coming to us in a more formal way. It just has to it's something that Kate and I have been, kind of in the background, sort of trying to figure out what the words should be, and the law department is working that out. We talked about it. It's talked about it at a previous meeting. I don't know if you guys remember early on when we were talking about January, when we were talking about rules, something like that.
It's been a while, probably January. Yeah.
So it'll come. So that was the other half of this particular agenda item, but I only focused on the webinar because that's all I had right now. But the idea is to not try to do things ourselves, not to assume that we're the only people that are interested, not to assume that we're the only people that have the energy for this, and to try to make it more of a community effort through these two kind of parallel ideas. One is the reviving the consortium, which used to be very successful but needs to be done in a slightly different way in order to have a sustainable sort of process, and this Corps of Volunteers, which is coming to you soon. Thank you for inviting me back up.
Can I ask one question while you're still up there? How much have you discussed this, and has there been? Have you talked to anyone that you seem to have been energized or feel motivated because of further conversation, or
about which part?
About the volunteer corps. Is it an idea? Have you talked to other people, and is there have 6 people said, "Yeah, that's great. I'd love to do that"?
So it's an idea that that has bounced around for a couple of years. It came up. Kate, you can stop me if I'm misspeaking, But I believe that the real impetus for this came up last year when we were in the process of doing the recruiting effort to try to find more commissioners, because we had people leaving and we didn't have people necessarily coming. So Amanda and I and a few other people and Kay did some really hard work to try to recruit some more commissioners. And in the process, we started hearing from people saying, well, I'd really like to volunteer for the commission, but I can't actually serve for a 3-year term. So we were trying to figure out how to make a space for people like that. That's what you were talking about, Cade, right?
Yeah,
So
and-
it's
and-
something that's existed and not existed, and we talked about it and whatever, and we
I mean,
realized.
to your point, Charles, just from putting the one paragraph blurb in the 5 newsletters we've put out, I've had 8 people that have reached out and said, I want to volunteer.
That's the reason why that blurb is in the newsletters.
Yeah,
because we
I
keep-
send that out when I send out the agendas now as
Yep.
well, and I've had people reach out. There are many boards and commissions that the city has trouble finding people to fill vacancies. Through this effort, I've also created a wait list of people that have said, when there are vacancies, I want to apply. So
Right.
there is genuine interest in it. I think we're just trying to kind of give that interest a structure.
So, I can't get it, we really can't get into the details of the volunteer corps yet because it hasn't totally been vetted through law and whatnot. So we need to wait to talk about that. But that's a set of ideas that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is how to continue doing good work, especially long-range work, without exhausting ourselves, because that's where I am right now. I'm just doing a lot. And it's not sustainable. It's not, I'm not complaining, I'm just, noting it's not something that we can keep expecting all of us to keep doing.
I was just going to say, I think that would bring people into the fold who maybe don't have this time block available to them.
That's exactly
Maybe you have
right.
small children, you can't get
Yep.
away, you don't have sitters, whatever, but you might have the daytime free, or you might have other times.
Specialized interests, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So,
we
yeah, or
know that
specialized
there are
interests, yeah.
people out there who want to help, and we're trying to make a space for them. So that was the other half of the discussion item that we don't quite have enough information to talk about yet. In some detail and vote on and stuff. All right, thank you for letting me come back up and chat.
All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
You don't technically. We went through this whole training as staff, which was enlightening to me. You can just say, as the chair, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Or you can ask Carl for it.
You shouldn't have to ask, because what if someone votes no?
All right, as there's no further business to discuss, meeting is adjourned.